you think that hyperinflation might actually be a good thing for America.
The worst form of hyperinflation, which I've termed top-down hyperinflation. This is just trying to bail out billionaires, bail out companies. The good part of hyperinflation would be bottom up. Let's say taking the federal minimum wage and making it to roughly something like $208 an hour as of yesterday, based on gold pricing. The top-down type of hyperinflation we're experiencing now leads to a bunch of incompetent people at the top trying to get a bunch of people at the bottom to prop all of this up. And it's just not going to work. In the meantime, you've got everybody in the middle that are just kind of stepping back, myself included, saying, okay, well, I'm going to just watch and see what happens because you people have lost your minds. Imagine for just a second here a world where employers have to first buy Bitcoin in order to have labor. That's checkmate. That ends all this bullshit very quickly. No more bailing anybody out. And that middle class will come roaring back to life very quickly. Won't take long. Wouldn't take more than about a year.
Well, that seems like a trade worth making. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Bitcoin News Channel. I'm your host, Rob Wallace, and today I'm very glad to be joined by Axel, aka Financial Physics, a market analyst, a Bitcoin-only advocate, and one of the best no-nonsense financial commentators you'll find on the internet. Axel, how you doing today?
I'm well, thank you. Thank you for having me on. It's good to be with you.
Yeah, absolutely. As we were speaking, I found your content around a year and a half, 2 years ago, and what you do is really awesome. You stand there in your garage with a camera and you tell people what is actually going on in the American economy. Something that is very hard to find these days, especially on big networks like CNBC. And one of your theses that you espouse is that you think that hyperinflation might actually be a good thing for America. Hyperinflation, the fear of it, is what actually got me into Austrian economics and the idea of hard money back in 2009, 2010. And so it's always been a lingering thought in the back of my mind, but we have the dollar, and the dollar is the king of fiat currencies. So is it actually possible to have hyperinflation in America, and why do you think it could possibly be good?
So it depends on the type of hyperinflation that exists. So let's deal with there's two questions that are implied there. Let's deal with what we're seeing currently versus what I correct for when I talk about hyperinflation. So the current state of hyperinflation right now is print money and keep injecting it in the form of liquidity injections. Liquidity injections, for people who may not be up to speed on that, that's what that means is that people paid too much money for these underlying assets, and it doesn't make any difference what asset it is, whether it's real estate, whether it's a company, whether it's a stock, it doesn't matter what the asset is. If you have to keep injecting liquidity into it to prop it up, it's because there isn't a buyer on the other side of that. In other words, the equity is fake. It's fake equity. This leads to the worst form of hyperinflation, which I've termed top-down hyperinflation. This is just trying to bail out billionaires, bail out companies, bail out all of these assets that are grossly overvalued, like in some cases ridiculously overvalued. And a good example of this is I live in Houston. There are empty buildings everywhere. And I don't mean strip malls. I mean like buildings. They're empty. There's no one in these things. They can't find tenants because it just, as the economy shrinks, which it is, you just don't have need for that much square footage. That's a different topic. We'll go into that later on. But this top-down inflation problem, it serves to just benefit a handful of people that are at the top. Now, let's deal with when I talk about hyperinflation. So when I talk about hyperinflation being good, the good part of hyperinflation would be bottom-up hyperinflation. That would be like your Weimar-style hyperinflation. That would be, let's say, taking the federal minimum wage and making it to roughly something like $208 an hour as of yesterday, based on gold pricing. And that is in line with 1971 $1.60 an hour minimum wage. The minimum wage discussion is, if you want to have that later on, that's fine as a topic unto itself. But as long as dollars are printed from nothing, and they are conjured from nothing, they have no intrinsic or mathematical value to them at all, then, and you're going to create, and you have a situation where the government is creating money, well, then it's not out of line to say, well, have government create a minimum wage. You can't have one without, you can't have both. You don't get to have your cake and eat it too. You don't get to have the whole idea of we want to have a free market while at the same time having a Federal Reserve. You don't get to do that. This is a sort of a smokescreen that people do. And I think that they get confused. They try to apply free market hard money principles to a captured fiat economy. And that is extremely dangerous, because that just tortures people. That tortures everybody out here. I mean, I saw a tweet the other day that was something to the effect of, everybody's making money except the people working. Yeah, that's a very good way of putting it. It's very succinct. That's very pithy. It's a very good way of putting that, because, yeah, the people who are doing all the work, they're not making any money, but the people who don't seem to do any work, and whether that's on the upper end of the stratosphere or at the bottom, doesn't matter. In either welfare case, it doesn't matter. It's everybody in the middle that's getting squished. And they're having to pay for both of this, which is the worst form of hyperinflation that we're seeing. So you have people that are working harder than they've ever worked. They're making more dollars they've ever made. They're going backward faster than they've ever gone, to the point where you have doom spending. You have people just saying, screw it, why bother saving money? Yeah, this is what happened in every country that's ever had a hyperinflationary scenario. People have to spend it faster, progressively faster. And this is happening in the U.S., but it's happening in such a way to try and keep all of the hierarchy that exists currently. In other words, the people that screwed all this shit up, the people that have caused all of these problems, they're trying to keep the same people there. And unfortunately, we also have a bunch of Americans. This is another sad reality. It's sort of this better the devil you know kind of thing. They want to keep the same people. No, these people are incompetent. They're checked out. They have nothing in common with the average person anymore. They've lost all touch between, and this has happened with, and you've probably heard me talk about this a couple times. There's this problem where you've got so many people that have completely lost touch with the concept of production and money altogether. There's just they've lost the connection between this. We see this in companies where you've got people that are in authority positions that don't even know what the hell their company does anymore. They don't even know what the people that do all the work even do anymore. And the people who do all the work, they don't even know really what they're supposed to do, because all of the competent people that were there before them that used to be their bosses, they all got fired because they were too expensive, which leads into the competency crisis. And all of the stuff that we're seeing happen right now, all of this madness that we're seeing, it boils down to the top-down type of hyperinflation we're experiencing now leads to a bunch of incompetent people at the top trying to get a bunch of people at the bottom who don't know what they're doing to prop all of this up. And it's just not going to work. In the meantime, you've got everybody in the middle that are just kind of stepping back, myself included, saying, okay, well, I'm going to just watch and see what happens, because you people have lost your minds. You're crazy what you're trying to do.
Yeah,
I hope that explains it.
It does. So the difference between
as well as I can anyway.
What we have right now is the top-down hyperinflation, where asset prices are propped up, and you would prefer to see a bottom-up hyperinflation where real wages go up, right? Where we're getting a minimum
in this particular scenario. So yeah, I mean, if someone wants to have the conversation of saying, like, well, we don't need to have a minimum wage, for example. Well, yeah, if you had a hard currency. So let's take gold or Bitcoin. Either one, I don't really care. I'll talk about either one of them because they both have good properties to them. But this is a Bitcoin podcast, so we'll talk Bitcoin for just a second. Imagine for a second here paying people in Bitcoin for their labor. You can't then inflate away their earnings. You can't. It's not possible now. So now you've paid them, and it's like you can't then say, okay, now let's go ahead and print more money. Print more what? How are you going to do this? How do you print more Bitcoin? You don't. There's 2.1 quadrillion sats that exist. That's it. As soon as that number changes, everybody's going to say, okay, well then it's no longer a good currency anymore, which means it's not going to happen. So even if you could get and that's the other thing, the transparency thing. Somebody was arguing with me about that, and I said, well, I mean, even if 51% decide to change the number of Bitcoin available, it's public. No, I mean, everybody would know about it instantly. The whole world would know it. It's as opposed to what we have right now. We have the Federal Reserve. Who knows how much money was printed this morning before 10 a.m.? Nobody knows. No one knows, except for maybe a handful of people in the deep Fed that maybe know that. And they're not going to disclose any of the information because it's counterfeiting. everything they're doing is is bad. There's nothing good about this. So yeah, in a hard money environment, no, you don't need to have a minimum wage. Sure, that's right. But in this situation, no, you need to have either wages have to come way, and I mean way up, or prices have to drop. Prices have to collapse. Real estate, housing, car prices, these absurd prices on cars. The what $1,400 a month car payments I'm seeing people have now, that's insane. That's crazy. Even I think what $775 is now the national average. That is a high number. Oh my God.
Yeah, and we're seeing the national debt really hit this logarithmic curve, right? It was 19 trillion when Trump entered office in 2017, and now we're at 39 trillion, right? So we've added 20 trillion since 2017, less than a decade ago. What does that mean?
And that's just the numbers they're honest about.
Yeah. Yeah, like how does that affect the average person, right? And how would you explain it to the average person, the difference in their lifestyle going from $19 trillion in national debt to $39 trillion?
Oh yeah, your money is basically halved. I mean, for the most part. I mean, like your spending power is upstream of pricing, or at least it's supposed to be. Spending power is what like men don't work for money. They work for that which the money will buy. And when the money gets printed to worthlessness, they'll just stop working because now the money doesn't buy anything. Well, now you have this, your effective spending power has been halved. And I think everybody has seen it. Even people who don't understand economics. You don't have to have a degree from some fancy, prestigious university. You really don't. You just need to understand that when you go to the grocery store and you go to buy something and you see that the product has gotten, precipitously smaller that you're purchasing, and it also costs 25, 35, 40, 50, 60, 100% more. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure that out and go, dude, what happened to the money? Why am I spending more and more and more money? That's all this is. So your spending power gets cut in half just with that. And it's all deficit spending. There is no way to pay any of this back. There's no mathematical way to pay any of this back, at least not you could print it away. That's your Weimar Republic. You could print it away, which I would argue that would be probably the best thing you could do. But you wouldn't do it at a government level. Again, you would do it by a bottom-up situation. You would send everybody $10 million and just call it good and let them wipe out all their debt. And that, of course, that floods the banks with a bunch of worthless paper, which is exactly all it is. It's just a bunch of worthless paper. And it teaches a what I would consider to be a very honest lesson to banking. That if you want to have, there used to be something called legitimate, honest banking. There used to be bankers who truly would only make loans if it made true financial sense. That that like there was a reason you were doing this loan. The person had the ability to pay it back, and or the business that you were investing in was a legitimate business that had an actual profit margin. There was an actual business plan there that was going to work, or that at least you believed it was going to work. We don't have that anymore. Now it's shotgunning, it's just gambling, it's just throwing money at the system. It's a mess what's happened here. So
yeah, and just let's do a little thought experiment. Say, I mean, we saw COVID that when they sent out the checks, right, for $1,400 to everybody, and prices for food and everything that you needed to survive went up drastically. If they sent out $10 million checks, what does that do? Does that just mean that the fiat currency becomes, everybody could cancel their debts, of course, but then what? The currency is just worthless, right? And we got to just accelerates the starting over process. Is that what we're going for here?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I get called an accelerationist all the time, and I'm comfortable with that term only because it's like, how I take that is like, what you're saying is that I already see where this is going. Let's hurry up and do this so that we can go back to normal. Mm-hmm. Because the reality is that people, again, that middle class, this is the middle class, that was Americana. That's what America was all about. It was about that middle class. Okay, it wasn't the extreme highs like your kings, queens, princes, potentates, dictators, czars, whatever. It wasn't the extreme highs, and nor was it the extreme lows. It was that large chunk of middle class that existed, and that's what made the country actually fantastic. It isn't magic soil. It's not magic dirt. There was a middle class that existed. That middle class has been effectively almost eradicated, and they've been demoralized. I think that's pretty obvious at this point. They've been pretty demoralized. And so Yeah, I mean, those people are always gonna say, well, okay, hey, let's say that the dollar hyperinflated tomorrow morning. Everybody got a check for $10 million in the mail, and they wiped out all of their static debt. Okay, fine. And there's a whole bunch of $100 bills blowing around all over the streets. I mean, because nobody wants them anymore. So it's like they blow around like leaves. Let's say that happens. All that happens is that middle class, the people who know what they're doing, the competent people, come back, and they start saying, okay, we can do all this. We can still fix everything. We can do all this work, but you're going to have to pay us in something other than this because this isn't worth anything. So now let's work out how we're gonna have an energy transfer, which is all this. That's all that is. It's just an energy transfer. How are we going to have an honest energy transfer between me, the guy doing the work, and the guy wanting to pay for the work? Because I mean, in a hard money economy, this is another truism that exists. The 80-20 rule comes roaring back very quickly in a hard money economy. The people who do all the work, and what I mean by that, that's people who are doing the work that you either don't want to do or can't do for yourself. That's it. Okay? So I mean, there's a lot of people out there who don't want to do plumbing, right? They don't want to do it. I don't want to do plumbing. I'm doing plumbing right now, but I don't want to do plumbing. And if I could pay somebody to do it, I would do it. I don't have any money. I don't have enough money to pay for that. So I'm doing it myself. But the guys who do all the work that you don't want to do or can't do, that's who's going to absorb 80% of the wealth. Again, it'll happen very quickly. The 20% absorb 80%, and which means that you don't have the wealth disparity that we're seeing today. You know, today's modern left, they see it as like, oh my God, there's this big wealth disparity. Like, yes, but it's the wrong kind of wealth disparity. It's not people who are working. It's people who are just getting printed money and claiming their asset values are worth this much, and they just keep borrowing fake equity. That's not the same as the guy who's working 12 hours a day and doing a really good job, and he's in high demand. That's not the same kind of wealth. Whole different kind of wealth. And so in the 20% will come right back, and that middle class will come roaring back to life very quickly. It won't take long. I would say with the internet, assuming that you didn't have the internet completely and totally controlled, I'd say it wouldn't take more than about a year. About a year for all the competent people to come back out of the woodwork.
Well, that seems like a trade worth making. But do you think that in America, I mean, of course, we had this golden era post-World War II where there was a fat middle class and people could have one worker per household and they could raise kids and have 2 cars. Do you think that was just an oddity of history, the fact that we just had all the manufacturing and all the gold was here and that we were able to live high off the hog for 20, 30 years, but then we just got too into welfare before it all got dissipated away? Or do you think that a large middle class like that is sustainable for a modern economy?
Yes and no. You've got a couple. There's a lot going on with that question. So your post-World War II era, you had a couple of things happen. We had a baby boom between 1946 and 1964. That baby boom itself does tend to fuel a lot of future economy. It does, because you just have more people. There's one way to expand an economy: add people. That's it. At the same time, after post-war, there was this massive surge of immigration from Western Europe. And of course, many share the same values, same work ethic, same values, and so on. And that fueled a ton of it. You also have that there was still, that was like post New Deal, so you still had money printing, you still had a lot of things that were going on within that. So I mean, without getting into like too far in the weeds, but if you go back to like even 1865, post Civil War, or Northern War, you go back to that, and you see that's money printing even started back then. This is where you had the banks that were constantly, always and forever, lending more money than they had gold to back it. And it's why I'm convinced the Fort Knox audit thing. I would have loved to have seen that audit. I absolutely would have loved to have seen that. I knew that was never going to happen because who knows how many times that gold's been counted. It's probably been counted 600 times by now. And so, yeah, I mean, like there is that. Do I think that kind of existence is possible again? Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
I wanted to briefly interrupt today's interview to give a big shout out to our lead sponsor, Rhino Bitcoin. Rhino is the all-in-one Bitcoin super app built by Bitcoiners for Bitcoiners. Buy or sell instantly. Send sats anywhere on the Lightning Network. Withdraw straight to cold storage. Even turn sats into gift cards or link to a Casa multisig, all within one sleek interface. And Rhino is just warming up. Soon, you'll pay bills, borrow against your Bitcoin, and save for retirement, all without leaving the app. Download Rhino at rhinobitcoin.com or tap the link in the description below. Use promo code Bitcoin News and Rhino will drop you $10 of free Bitcoin into your account today. Secure your stack with Rhino Bitcoin and enjoy the rest of the video.
You have to have a natural economy that with that. You cannot have this massive manipulation where you're just printing money. Some of that probably was fueled. Some of the more busy work type things, the leave it to beaver kind of thing, where you've got the dad who works and it's sort of this vague job. It's not real specific. It's vague. He works in an office someplace. Like, what does that mean? That's just kind of your typical Hollywood thing. Like, we don't know what job to give this person because nobody in Hollywood has a job, so we don't know what to do. Why not make him like a roofing contractor or something like that, where there's always a demand. There's always going to be some level of demand for that, and that's what I mean. That's where it goes back to what I was saying. Like, there's this disconnect that's happened between production and earning money, and it's happened and it's pulled things too far apart. And I do think that there was sort of the rise. There was also the Cold War that fueled some of that. Again, I'm not an expert on this, but I mean, you can kind of look at the way that the Soviets were doing it. The Soviets achieved full employment, right? There was this obsession with full employment. Why? Why? Like, for real, why do you need to have full employment? At a certain point, you want to have people achieve boredom. That's where inventions come from. That's where stuff comes from. Is some guy in his garage tinkering with something, comes up with a cool invention, and these things are kind of important to do that. So, I mean, it's a big question you're asking, and I'm trying not to get too far into the weeds with that because there's a whole bunch of different factors that affect that, at least in my opinion, and without getting hyper boring about it, But yeah, I mean, I think the answer is yes and no. Yeah, there was still a lot of fiat printing that was going on, but it's early on. And as with all things, it's just as with all Ponzi schemes, they work great in the beginning. Mm-hmm. The people that are in there, it's awesome in the beginning. Everything's fantastic, and you can do it in an up economy as long as you have to maintain the birth rates. So if your birth rate exceeds the amount of interest you're paying, sure, you can pull it off for a long time. But what happens on the downhill side of that? I'm a Gen Xer. Gen X, I mean, like 1974 is like a crater for birth rates. It just craters. Well, yeah, there's just not many of us out here. And then millennials aren't the big wave of generation. There also wasn't this massive amount of immigration that's happened, again, from countries that have similar, where they can work together, where they have a similar work ethic and a similar idea of what civilization should be like.
Yeah, and it just leads to a situation where, as we said, we're $39 trillion in debt. The dollar can't buy you anything anymore, and we need a solution. And you were first exposed to Bitcoin in 2010, ignored it, came back in 2015 and ignored it again because you thought that you had to buy a whole Bitcoin. So when did you finally get it through your skull that Bitcoin
you got me pretty well pegged there. You got a good memory. You have a good memory. Yeah, it was 2010. Somebody says, "Hey, check out this Bitcoin thing," and I said, "Well, what is it?" And they said, "Oh, it's like a stock." That's these exact words, and I'm like, "I'm not interested." That was the first thing I said. I'm not interested, and it wasn't until 5 years later, and then I didn't realize that you could just buy a partial. Otherwise, I would have started buying Bitcoin and stuff. And I thought, oh, no, I had to buy a whole coin. I don't have that kind of money. I work like everybody else. I don't have that kind of cash. So, that was what happened. So I'm sorry. What was the rest of that? You actually got me. You got me on this one. Go back with the rest of the question.
I did my homework. So I'm just wondering what made it finally click. You have also said that you need to understand gold before you can understand Bitcoin. So what was there anything that particularly made it the light bulb go off for you?
So I came from the pawn business. I was a pawnbroker, and so in the pawn business, of course, precious metals that's just a part of your existence. Gold, guns, all of it, you name it, and all the good stuff. So you get to learn about this stuff, And of course, it takes you down the rabbit hole of history, of understanding. And then, of course, you begin to think like, well, why was gold chosen? And the more you read about it, it's just, the more you read about it, to talk about gold, just briefly to answer your question, it becomes completely logical. It becomes hyper logical, in fact. It's like, dude, this actually makes total sense. It really does. Well, so when I finally understood the idea behind Bitcoin, then it was like, oh, this is a brilliant idea. In fact, the more I thought about it, I'm like, this is actually too good of an idea. In fact, this is such a good idea, no one's going to understand this. And that was really the first way I started thinking, because, it's like a few people got it. They're like, yeah, this will change the world. This will change the idea of how people see money. Like, yes, that would be really, really cool. But imagine for just a second the implications. Imagine having a hard currency that, unlike gold, where gold can be, one of these things, it's a little tricky, where it's like, okay, yeah, you have it in your vault, but how much paper have you lent out on that gold? You're relying on the honesty of the third party. Bitcoin removes that. Bitcoin makes life even simpler. It makes it even more. In fact, it actually makes it more harsh. Is a good way of looking at that. Think of it like this: gold either weighs or it doesn't. It's pure or it's not. You have it or you don't. Bitcoin is you have it or you don't. That's it. There's no speculation on whether or not, is that real gold? Does it have enough gold content in it? It removes that entirely from the equation. It's either there or it isn't. That's it. And that is a big deal. And as soon as I began to think about it in those terms, from a business standpoint, that changes absolutely everything. Because now it ends lending basically as a practice. I mean, you could have somebody invest maybe with the understanding that investment carries risk. It isn't a savings account. 401ks are not savings accounts. Those are gambling accounts. If you have Bitcoin, for example, and I come to you with a business idea and I say, hey, I've got this idea for a business, XYZ business, whatever. And I say, hey, would you like to invest in this? You do so knowing full well you could lose absolutely every bloody sat you gave me. Period. And that's it. That changes so much of the economy right there, because now it puts trust and competency right at the top. It goes right to the top of the stack. Are you competent? Can you run? Do you have the ability to run this business? Do you have the ability to make this profitable? Are you not going to screw me and just take off with my money? Right? It brings all of that stuff right back. There's no more bailing anybody out for anybody. Not for you, not for me, not for anybody. There's no more. It changes the way that business has to get done, and it means that all of the people who are truly competent, the true hard workers, the people who are doing all the work, the people who are willing to take a calculated, measured, and well thought out risk, that comes back into being important again. All of that stuff comes back to being important. No more of this this sort of blow money around and just and there's no more, the back in the day with the lending that used to exist with gold notes, gold certificates. Banks would notoriously lend out more certificates. That's why they would have to, that's where bank runs came from. That's where the term bank run came from. And so, and as I pointed out before, bank runs bring people together. And that is something, just really quickly, just to interject this, something about a bank run. You could absolutely hate the person standing next to you with every fiber of your being, but you both have one thing in common. You have been taken advantage of by the bank. And that does have a tendency to bring harmony. There is a unifying effect there.
And brings a lot of sales to pitchfork manufacturers, correct?
That's exactly what happens, yeah. And so, so that's where, to answer your question, I began to really see it as when I started to understand that would be the way that would work. I understand that there, the cost of moving money and that the blockchain gets bigger and bigger. I understand all that stuff, but there's ways around that too. That can be done, and you can still have good verifiable money. And I think what Satoshi, whoever he or she or they are, came up with is astoundingly brilliant. And it really does solve a lot of problems. But it, again, like I said, it's a two-edged sword, because now that means that there isn't a bailout. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that's what it means. It means that the good thing is, though, from a business standpoint, as someone who has failed in business on many occasions, and I have, I'm very honest about that, because that's how you have to have that. Anybody who tells you that comes to you and says, I want to be the leader of your company, and they've never had a failure in business, I wouldn't trust them, because then they don't know how to handle a failure. They don't know how to correct out of a problem. It'd be like saying that you're trying to hire a race car driver who's never wrecked a car. Yeah, how's he going to handle it when he does wreck a car? Mm-hmm. Is it going to completely destroy his confidence, and now basically the guy's worthless? In the meantime, you just paid this guy a bunch of money? Yeah. So, yeah, no, you have to have that. You have to have people who know that kind of stuff, and those things are valuable over time. So it clarifies that relationship. That's how I saw it.
And so you're a financial educator. You're talking to thousands of people on a weekly basis, right? You've got quite the large.
One hopes.
And so, I mean, but you talk about, of course, real estate and the labor market a lot. Bitcoin comes up time to time, but not too much. Do you think that people are ready to hear the message on Bitcoin at this point?
So I'll give you just my honest thought on this. I think that because Bitcoin is such a brilliant asset, and I think that there are very smart people out there that have figured this out as well. I think that some of them are slightly malevolent in nature and want to turn Bitcoin into this. Oh, it's a scam. It's a token. It's for gambling. It's all speculation. It's all speculative. It's not really speculative in the slightest. There's 21 million whole coin units. There's nothing speculative about that. Nothing. That's like saying that that planet Earth is X amount of kilograms. It's not going to really change much in our lifetime, right? I mean, it is what it is. But they keep measuring against dollars. And that's where they get this from. So it creates this illusion of up and down instability, even though it's not unstable at all. It's the most stable thing you could probably find out there in terms of currency. So when you have something like that, with all these people that are wanting to undermine a perfectly good idea, it's difficult to want to break into that space and then start talking about it from the logical perspective that I would talk about it. Because 5% might understand it. If the other 95% are going to, in the back of their mind, they heard some guy on CNBC in a suit and a tie talk about how Bitcoin is highly speculative and you should only allocate maybe not even 1% of your portfolio. Again, they use these words like portfolio and speculation. They throw these words around, and these words mean things. They go into people's heads and they rattle around, and people see it as nothing more than just another form of gambling type investment. That's what ends up happening. So what I try to do, at least in my line, is avoid that. And so if I'm asked directly about Bitcoin, I'll answer the question. But I usually try to get people to understand the simpler stuff that they can understand. They can understand that the idea behind when someone purchases a house, let's say, and they say, look, see, my house went up in value. Did it? Did it? I mean, because if you're talking about the idea of equity, what kind of equity are we talking about? Do you have access to it? Because if you have to go down to the bank and borrow money with interest, by the way, you still have to pay that back. Right? I mean, and that money doesn't exist. So trying to explain, I try to approach it more of sort of a glancing blow is how I approach Bitcoin. Is trying to get people to understand things. If I can get somebody to truly understand gold and why gold was pitched a hell of a game. And it did. For 6,000 plus years, it pitched a hell of a game. If I can get people to understand that, getting them to understand Bitcoin is like sliding into a warm bath. It's easy at that point. They're like, oh, I get this now. Yeah, it's the same basic idea. It's just that you don't have to worry about weight and content. Exactly. And on top of that, it's verifiable. On top of that, you also have, you don't have the speculation of, is there gold to back whatever certificates or claim checks that you're using? or unless you're going to use actual physical gold coin. I'm not above that. Fine, we can do the outlaw Josie Wales thing and carry around little bags of gold dust or something. I'm good with that too. But then, same thing. You have to educate people on what is gold, what is gold dust, how do you know, how to do a displacement test, how to use an acid kit. Most people are not going to do that. They're going to want to do that trusted third party thing of like, look, see how easy it is? Just put your gold in my vault, and I'm going to give you these little certificates. And it's happened throughout just, well, thousands of years. It's been a problem for a very long time in our history. And so, yeah, I mean, Bitcoin does end that. And in other words, what I'm saying, it's a big idea. It's a huge idea. And I think it's a little too big for people, especially if in the back of their mind, they keep hearing the terms speculation and allocated portfolios and all these things on CNBC and the other propaganda outlets. I think that's what happens, is you bump up against that. So I try not to bump up against it. I try to start them with the practical stuff, and then they just kind of gravitate into it.
Yeah, once you start going down the rabbit hole, it naturally leads you to Bitcoin, and you need multiple
It's very
touches.
quick.
You need multiple touches over multiple years to really open your eyes to realize what a breakthrough it truly is. But one cohort that has really seems to have understood what Bitcoin is now is Wall Street, right? Since 2024 and the launch of the ETFs, of course, we've seen BlackRock, Larry Fink, Fidelity, all the biggest names are interested in Bitcoin. Morgan Stanley is now going to issue their own Bitcoin ETF. Do you think that this is a just natural part of the growth of Bitcoin and the adoption, or should we have more trepidation in terms of Wall Street entering into this arena?
So my only thought on Wall Street entering this is that, like, look, it's a free country for the moment, and anybody on Wall Street is welcome to join Bitcoin because I think of it as it's like sovereign money, basically, if you want to think of it like that. So just like if another country has sovereign dollars, then they have sovereign dollars. I think of Bitcoin in the same kind of thing, except that your yachts can't be seized you can't do that. But so Wall Street's free to do whatever they want. When it comes down to the people, that if I would always be hesitant personally. That if I'm going to exchange my dollars, or I'm going to give my dollars to BlackRock, for instance. You mentioned BlackRock, so I'm just going to use them for instance. I'm not picking on them. How do I know that when the rubber meets the road, that I'm going to actually get, that they're going to send, that my wallet, my Trezor wallet, they're going to say, okay, yeah, Axel, here's your portion of your Bitcoin. It'll be sent to you, and you'll have it in a 10-minute time span. Because if I don't know that for a fact, then as far as I'm concerned, that is speculative. That is all of those things. Portfolio, speculative, that is all of those things by definition. If it's not your keys, it's not your coin. And that's really what it comes down to. And I would say that about anybody too. I would say that the CEO of River would probably agree with me on this too. Like, it's the truth, right? I mean, it's just kind of how it is. I mean, what if you own Bitcoin on like figuratively speaking on paper, that's not the same thing as having Bitcoin in your wallet and it dead ends right with you. It's not the same thing.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's Bitcoin's superpower. The fact that you can take sovereign ownership of it by just memorizing 12 words in your head, cross a border, still have it with you, is absolutely amazing. And it makes it different from any other asset. And one asset that we are taught from a very early age that is the road to wealth in America is real estate. And you put out some amazing content when it comes to real estate in America.
Thank you.
What is going on there? And a lot of people find themselves in a position where they're stuck. They're trapped right now. What is the current outlook for real estate in America? And are we about to see that big collapse?
One can hope. I don't see it as a collapse. I see it as a correction. I think real estate has been so grossly overbought. I did a video, I want to say about 5 or 6 days ago, where somebody posted a chart of where the divergence started happening with buyers and sellers. And it was right when I did a video December 3rd of 2023, so almost 2024, so a little over 2 years ago, about 2.25 years ago. I was in my wife's Jeep, and I just did a quick video, just out of, I just like, hey, I want to tell you guys something. I was predominantly talking to landlords. And I was trying to tell landlords, I was trying to talk some sense into them. And I said, hey, listen, guys, you may want to consider an exit strategy, because the you're going outside of the market. At a certain point, your tenants, every rental property requires a corresponding tenant. Okay, this is just a reality. If you have, I don't care if you have 500 rental properties, but if you can only find 10 tenants, you're screwed. Unless you own all of that in cash and you have the ability to constantly go out there and maintain all that, no one does. No, and that's not how people buy real estate. It's not how you make money in real estate. How you make money in real estate is leveraging. Because there's no one in their right mind would go pay $500,000 in cash to buy a house and then rent it out for $2,000 a month. Nobody would do that. I would tell you you're crazy if you did that. Why wouldn't you just keep the $500,000? Like, there's just so many other things you could go do. Your return on your investment is so far out in the future. So no, it's based on leverage. And what was happening, and I noticed this again back then, is when I really started seeing this becoming, at least to me, it was like a full-throated shout. It wasn't like, oh wow, there's a possible. No. It was like alarm bells were going off in my head. Like, oh my God, you guys are way above the markets now. If the market in other words, it's real simple. Take your average incomes, or excuse me, your median incomes of people. If median income at the time, I think at the time was like 72,000 or something, and that was for like a full-time. That was for full-time employment, and that's oftentimes with two people working in the house. Sometimes in full-time and then full-time plus, doing a side gig of some kind. So if that's the median income, and you're trying to get $2,800 a month rents out of these people, you're outside the market. You're too far out. They can't afford it. Again, this is just being a responsible adult here. You're asking people to pay more money than they can by rights afford, and be able to save money, because that's important. That's important. You want people to, especially if you're talking about your own countrymen, you want them to be able to save money, because you want them to become owners themselves. That's for other reasons I'll go into later on if you want, but ownership is critical. You want your people owning the country in which they live. Otherwise, you get this disaster of people who don't care, and that's where we're headed. Well, so when I did this video, I pointed this out, that you're going too far outside the market, and you're going to get caught. Sooner or later, you're going to get caught in this. And it's not far off that you're going to try, one day what's going to happen is you're going to try and sell that property because you can't find a tenant to pay these inflated rents, because you paid too much money for the asset. There was this, because you're right, everybody got told the number one way to make money in this country is real estate, right? By the way, speaking of, I just found out that Grant Cardone follows me. I didn't realize that. Yeah, it's like, this is the thing. It's like they tell everybody, like, but it's like, that was the case in an up economy. That would be the case if you had a birth rate that continued to support that, and you had this expanding group of people buying houses and renting houses, and then that would be the case. We don't have that. We have the exact opposite of that happen. In fact, actually, it's getting progressively worse. It's becoming very obvious what's happening. I mean, nobody has any kids anymore. How many people that are in their young 30s now have 3 kids? You're almost a freak if you have 3 kids. People look at you, they go, how do you afford it? They go, dude, where do you get the money? Yeah, I mean, it's because that's just kind of how it is. So, and especially for Gen Z, they're almost, I genuinely understand the plight of Gen Z, because they're looking at this going, how am I supposed to do any of this? Like, none of these numbers match. Exactly. That's what I was, so I called that out, that none of these numbers are going to match. None of the incomes are supporting this. If incomes were going up, let's say this was, and of course, this is the post-COVID world. If incomes were going up by, say, 20% a year, which they're not, then, yeah, maybe you could have 20% inflation. But that would defeat the purpose of inflation, right? The whole point of inflation is that people can't keep up with it. It's like, well, that sounds malevolent. Yes, it is malevolent. It's the whole point of inflation is that people cannot keep up with it. And once you go outside of that market, then you have this, which is right now. So now let's talk about right now. A whole bunch of people are now starting to go, what do you mean I can't sell this house for $800,000 that I bought for $650,000 back then? Like, yeah, you have to, For every transaction, there has to be a seller, but there also has to be a buyer. How many people out there have enough money to support that kind of house? And that's a dwindling number of people. On top of that, you add in the job market trepidation. You add in AI, which is a lot of that's just a cover for like companies that are saying, dude, we just can't afford to pay people to sit around and do nothing anymore. We can't afford to have people do data entry. Like, we're just going to have something. That's all it's happening. So you just see this tightening that's happening. Companies and businesses are having to tighten up everything, myself included. My business, we haven't hired anybody in years. We just don't. We don't, because we have to keep things very tight because we have razor-thin profit margins to deal with. And unlike other companies out there, I don't get bailouts. We actually have to make a profit. Not a very big one, but we do have to make a profit. And yeah, so all of this was coming. And the more money that people started borrowing to buy real estate, because again, the theory being, right, I want to get rich in real estate. So the idea was they forgot that you have to actually, you make your money on the buy, not the sell. You always make your money on the buy. This is the pawnbroker in me talking now. This is years of pawnbrokering. You make your money on the buy, not on the sell, because you have to be able to get out of it. And if you paid so much money for the asset, whatever it is, whether it's a house, a Rolex, it doesn't make any difference. If you paid too much money for it, you're going to play hell trying to get out of there, especially if the market starts to go against you. And right now, as very predictable, the market's going against it because there just isn't enough of this. People can live on credit cards for a while, but even look at the credit cards now. Credit card delinquencies are at an all-time high. Debt is at an all-time high. Everything is spiraling into a debt spiral. Like, yeah, it's because people can't afford any of this stuff. So now you have the so-called, the term I saw that Amy Mack on Bird Site was talking about, the accidental landlord. Which, and all the accidental landlord is a theory behind somebody bought a house, they paid too much money for it, they can't sell it now. So now they're like, well, I have to move because I have a job in another state, so we'll just go ahead and rent it out. So now you have people, and then of course they're trying to figure out how they can rent this house, but the rents are coming down now because they can't support whatever it was, the house, the mortgage payment that house was under. It's another thing too. I mean, again, if we want to get into heavy part of real estate, if we look at the cash on cash return for this kind of stuff, when you look at these numbers of like somebody, I saw there was a post somebody had wrote about a $650,000 duplex that they bought, and the real estate agent told them, oh yeah, you can rent each side out for $3,500. They didn't bother to check that because that's not true. You can't get 30 like this. I don't think there's too many markets in this country you can get that kind of money. And it turned out that it was only about $1,500 that you could get. So now this guy who paid $650,000 for this place is underwater and no way out. Like, yeah, this is the problem with this. Rental comps are very important when buying a house, especially unless you're going to just buy it for yourself and move into it and you buy it because you want it. Like I've said for a long time. I did another video last week. I said, because somebody had asked me, is this a good time to buy a house? And I said, you should buy a house if you want to buy the house and live in it. That's it. You buy it for the same reason you buy art. You buy it because you like it. It means something to you. You're going to move into it and you're going to live there. And it really doesn't. You don't care if the house value goes down by 50%. Who cares? Right? It just means that you go into your county assessor's office and say, hey man, lower my property taxes. That's all that means. But when you see these people that were borrowing money, buying going $500,000, $600,000 in the hole, and their cash flow position was like, it'll cash flow $250 a month. You took on a $600,000 note to make $200 to $300 a month. You are out of your mind. That is insane. I wouldn't do that on a $65,000 house. This is the old school landlord in me talking. Because I also did land. I owned houses and stuff. I was like, yeah, it's like, dude, I wouldn't give. There's no way. The numbers just don't pencil. You're taking on an enormous amount of risk to make not near. You have 2 months of vacancy. You wiped out all of your profit, and that's just vacancies. That's to say nothing about the tenant that you piss off doing something and they flush concrete down the toilets, and now you have a $25,000 repair that you need to deal with. That's to say nothing of any of that. And yeah, I mean, like this is so. I mean, again, I could go on and on and on about this, but like it's just, but that was where the divergence happened, and that's when I saw it, and I said, I'm going to say something about this, and then it got a bunch of people saw it. A bunch of people saw that video, and I got mocked constantly. The hate is just amazing on that video, but it's like, dude, no, it's correct. The numbers don't line up. None of the math lines up with what people have done.
Yeah, because a lot of people bought into the dream of being a landlord and getting that passive income. But the other side of that is that it creates a nation of renters. And I'd love to talk to you about the societal implications of renting everything, not being a true owner of your house, your property, or the Bitcoin, right? So what does it mean to have a renting society versus a ownership society?
Concept of ownership is critical. It's not taught much. Not that I've seen this, the schools. I don't think that I think there are some teachers. I'm not picking on teachers, but I think some teachers do understand concept of ownership, and they do understand that kids need to understand this. But it's not enough. Nowhere near enough. Concept of ownership is something that's supposed to be taught to kids at a really early age. The idea of ownership, not just of ownership of assets and property and your toys and your Bitcoin, but ownership of one's self, ownership of one's actions, ownership of all of this stuff. Good or bad, people are imperfect. They're hugely imperfect. If you look into my life, you will find massive imperfection. I promise you. And that's true of everybody. Everybody is a disaster. Every human being out here is a complete, total disaster. That's not necessarily bad. It just means that people have to learn at their own rate. And part of that is ownership. And the thing is when you have a society of renters, you get this very twisted view of the world where nobody wants to take ownership of anything. Part of like back in the day, they used to say like you had to own property to vote, for example. Well, how did you become a property owner? Back in the day, you went about 10 miles west and you said, I'll take this. And what that meant was you were taking responsibility for that. You were saying, okay, hey, I'm going to claim this, 40 acres, let's say, to put my family farm on. Well, you were taking ownership of that, meaning that you were taking responsibility for it as well. And ownership and responsibility go hand in hand. You have to have that. And when you have a whole society of people who don't own 1 square foot of the country that they're told is theirs, all through, and this is probably true for you, this is true for, I think, most people who went to public school. You're constantly told how this is your country and, my country 'tis of thee, and you're constantly told this stuff. Politicians cram this down people's throats every 2 years. About this is your country, go out and vote for me because reasons. And whereas no, ownership means that you actually have a stake in this. You have a legitimate stake. This is a problematic thing for landowners now. So what happens when you have a nation of renters or a large a plurality now, or if not a majority of people who don't own anything? And now the people who do own stuff say, hey, what you're doing to us is wrong. You're raising our property taxes to the point where it's stupid. We're like, because there are property owners out there that are talking about this. They say yeah, my property tax is tripled in 1 year. How's that even possible? It's because they arbitrarily say your property's worth more money. And it looks good on paper. You feel rich. That's all it is. You just feel rich. Knowing that some people will take the bait. They'll go to the bank and they'll borrow against the so-called equity to pay taxes. The worst possible thing, the worst possible scenario you could ever do is take the bait, go to the bank, borrow a bunch of money to pay taxes. So you're now paying debt on debt on debt on debt. It's the worst possible scenario. So when you have a nation of people who don't understand that, how are those people then who do own going to say, I need help, quick, muster the militia, figuratively speaking, if not literally, but let's just go with figurative for now, that they got to show up and help you out. Why would they help you? They don't own shit. They don't own any part of the country. They don't own anything. What do they care? Dude, that's landowner problems. I don't own land, so who cares? That is devastating. That's probably I would say one of the final nails in the coffin of any kind of free civilization at all is that right there, where people don't really have any connection to the land. They have no connection to the idea of where their food comes from. Where's chicken come from? Drive-through window, right? No, it comes from a bird It's like, so yeah, it's devastating. It's demoralizing, and it hurts young people immeasurably. Can it be fixed? Yeah, probably. But dude, it has done an enormous amount of damage to young people in the U.S. and it's really bad because they don't feel that connection. And you see it all the time. Gen Z kids are constantly talking about and millennials constantly hammering boomers for the disaster of boomerism. I tend to agree. Yeah, it is kind of a problem, but that's where that's coming from. It's a bunch of people who are saying, "Hold on, you're leaving us with kind of nothing but a bunch of debt and a bunch of we don't own any of this stuff. We don't have any real connection to this. How is this supposed to work for us?" It's, in other words, it's sort of like becoming like you're a guest in your own country. I mean, it really is. It's almost like you're a guest in your own, this is your country. You're told it's yours, but you don't own any of it, and you don't get any of the real benefits from it, other than maybe some political benefits. That's not. Sorry, there's just that's not. No, that doesn't work like that. You have to have people that have a genuine stake in their country, and they believe in it, because once they own property in their own country, they want to protect it. That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing.
And in rounding out here, I mean, you get a lot of comments. A lot of people, I'm sure, ask you, okay, so I see these problems, but what do I do? I mean, I'm renting right now. I've got student debt, all these things. There's a long list of why you can't become an owner, but what can you do practically starting today for the average person to get on that path of ownership and sovereignty?
So, I mean, in the case of Bitcoin, for example, or gold, I mean, I'll cop to both. But I would say with gold, it's always physical. You'd always want to have physical possession of it. Bitcoin, in the case of Bitcoin, you actually can own. It is property ownership. It is digital property ownership that is finite. And again, to the people who comment like, well, the 51% could make more. Like, yeah, but everybody would know about it then. So your spending power might adjust, but it would still be effectively the same because you know what's out there. As far as real estate or any of the other assets are concerned, at this point, I think that there is going to be a day of reckoning not too far off. I don't think it's too far away, and I think that even guys who would be considered probably my mortal enemy, in the banking world, even they're, I think, starting to see some of this, that there's cracks in this, and that these prices are either the wages have to come way up, like, again, substantially up, like tenfold up, or prices have got to collapse tenfold. It's really like that. And so at this point, it's kind of a patience game. But I would tell anybody, like, if you are able to do this, save what you can, in something either physical and portable, or in Bitcoin, either way. Okay, I mean, pick one, pick both. I don't really care. Something to that effect, and keep an eye on it. And then as time goes on, do keep this in mind too. More and more people need to, in my view, start demanding to be paid in something other than dollars, because objectively dollars are going to start not having any. They already have no intrinsic or mathematical value, but they're eventually going to start losing purchasing power, even at the mega corporations. This is where that collision of the competency crisis is going to start connecting badly, because you just have people. I mean, look for example, the companies don't even want to pay the people that are supposed to protect the company. They don't even want to pay them anything anymore. Like, this is basically the end of the Soviet Union, where everybody kind of loots everything that isn't bolted down, and nobody really cares because, well, nobody owns it. It's a problem. I would tell shareholders the same thing. If you can quietly exit a lot of your positions in the stock market, this is my opinion. It's my opinion. I'm not giving financial advice on this one. I'm just giving you my opinion. If I owned large amounts of shares in a 401k or some kind of so-called equities or something like that, I would be trying to quietly exit all of those positions personally, and then converting that to cash dollars, I guess, because that's what we're doing, but then quietly converting as many dollars as possible into something other than dollars that is, again, portable and a bit more liquid, because liquidity is going to be the problem. As all of this stuff starts to wind up here, all this madness, there's going to be a whole bunch, there's going to be a whole bunch of chairs or a whole bunch of people left without a chair, and the music stops. And all this liquidity, the theory of liquidity is going to go away. They're not going to have anywhere near the liquid. So the people who are the young person, for example, who starts saving even if it's a small amount, it doesn't seem like much. It doesn't have to seem like a whole lot, especially when it comes to things like Bitcoin. So let me do the Bitcoin thing. I'll do my Bitcoin commercial here. It doesn't take much Bitcoin in the future. It doesn't. It won't take a whole hell of a lot to actually have a fairly substantial nest egg because of that. Not because of interest, not because of compounding, not because Bitcoin doesn't do any of that, but just because you're locking in spending power. That's it. And that's what this is all about, the lockdown of spending power. So that would be what I would be recommending. I don't know why any boomer out there, I mean, for boomers, for the older people that are like, what do I do? What do I do? I've got there isn't a boomer out there that I haven't given them straight up financial advice where I've said, if you have a net worth that is greater than $1 million and you don't own one whole Bitcoin, you are out of your mind. You are crazy. If you have a net worth that's assets over, that's real net worth, not this fake bullshit net worth. No. If you actually have net worth of $1 million or greater, and you don't have at least one whole coin off the internet in a wallet secured, I think you're crazy, because you have the ability to do that, and it's not like it's going to go anywhere. I mean, you're effectively locking in legacy spending power by doing that. So.
Yeah, I mean, there's over 65 million millionaires on the planet, and there's only 21 million Bitcoin. But I do think that you have great advice of getting paid
every day.
Getting paid in Bitcoin. Getting paid in Bitcoin, right? Like, that is a change that you could make, offer a service online, right? And get paid in Bitcoin. You can't get paid online in gold, but you can get paid in Bitcoin on the internet.
Yeah, and whenever... Yeah, that's the thing. Is it and that's something that people don't understand too. This is a tough one. This is a tricky one. This is an advanced. And I'll wrap up with this because I know you got to go. But it's very different when somebody has to first go buy Bitcoin to pay you versus them just giving you dollars and then you go buy Bitcoin. It's a very different outcome. You're like, well, how is it any different? It's the same difference of people of people all over the world who have to buy dollars first before they can buy oil. That's the reality. The reason why the U.S. dollar has its value, any value that it has, is because other countries have to buy dollars first. If they didn't have to buy dollars first, the dollar would have gone away a long time. It had gone away in the 70s. The U.S. would have had to come up with something else. You know, all those people in the 70s would have got thrown out of office, or D.C. would have burned down back then. That's what would have happened. It's like the only reason they kept it around is that people have to buy dollars first in order to be able to buy oil. But, well, imagine for just a second here a world where employers or companies or anybody have to first buy dollar or buy Bitcoin in order to have labor. That is that's end game. That's checkmate. That ends it right there. That ends all this bullshit very quickly.
Boom. There you go. I think you laid out a viewpoint on the world that is extremely realistic, and not enough people have come to grasp it yet. So I appreciate you, the work you do, the videos that you share on a regular basis, helping to explain these things, because there's so much education that is necessary in these pivotal times. So Axel, if people want to find you online,
thank you so much.
Where should they go?
So on Twitter or X, it's Financial Fizz, PHYS, because the character limitation. So it's at Financial Fizz. On TikTok, because I'm still there, it's just Financial Physics, just the regular Financial Physics, not dash this, not whatever it is. It's just regular Financial Physics. There's like 600 other counterfeit accounts out there, or whatever it is. They all have more followers than I do, but yeah, it's just regular Financial Physics. And then and on YouTube, for people who still go to YouTube, or they're on there a lot, I try to remember to upload everything there and to back it all up, and it's Financial Physics 7451.
There you go. All right, Axel, thank you so much for your time, and I'll be sure to have you back on the show sometime in the future.
You're welcome.
Thanks for making it to the end of the video. If you could drop a like and a share, it would help in our mission to accelerate adoption. If you're looking for more Bitcoin signal, join over 10,000 readers of our newsletter, Bitcoin News Weekly. Every Monday morning, we send out the biggest headlines of Bitcoin to keep you in the know in under 5 minutes. Links below in the description. Then come hang with us live every Monday at 11 a.m. Eastern. We break it all down live on stream with a new guest, and you can add your 2 sats in the chat. See you next week.